If you're wanting to grow food in a way that embraces nature and looks absolutely beautiful, then food forests are for you. And in today's video, I'm going to jump straight into how you can transform part of your garden into a mini food forest. And I'm looking at two different options, one of which is to clear a space and the other in which is to transition part of your garden slowly over time into a food forest. So these are two options which are easy, and really all my videos are about kind of demystifying the design and creation and management of food forests. So today, by the end of this video, I'm hoping that you will be able to feel confident to get started, jump straight in and actually create a bit of food forest within your own garden. I'm Pippa Chapman. I design and manage food forests and have been doing for the last 15 years, and also author of The Plant Lover's Backyard Forest Garden. And I can't wait to help you to design your first bit of forest garden. So in this video, I really want to talk about why mistakes are okay. And in fact, the biggest mistake you can make is not actually getting started. I think we're so afraid of going wrong. We're so used to sort of within education, mistakes being a bad thing, that we let it stop us from just getting started. And actually, I want to kind of reframe this idea of mistakes or failure as part of the learning process of creating and managing food forests, of just actually feeling okay with things maybe dying or not doing well, and just seeing that as a way of sort of learning what does well in our garden and what doesn't. And even like growing things that then you realize taste absolutely disgusting, that's also part of our learning journey. So I want to start this video by kind of reframing this idea of being too afraid to get started because you feel that you don't have the experience or the knowledge, and that you might get things wrong, things might die, and actually just thinking of it as a really exciting food forest adventure, which may have a few kind of things that go wrong along the way, but that it doesn't matter, because ultimately every time that you plant something, whether it does well or not, that's part of your learning adventure. Apologies if there is a lot of noise in the background. I came out to record this video whilst it was peaceful, and then all of a sudden a band started up in the background. Someone must be having a party just down the road. If you are watching this video and you feel like you need a bit of extra support as well, I will put some links in the description for my food forest design workbook, which is a downloadable, printable workbook which goes through all the steps of designing a food forest from start to finish. So if you feel like you would really like to give it a go, but you just need a bit more of a helping hand, then you could check that out as well. So I have plenty of other videos that go into what is a food forest and what are the benefits of a food forest. So I don't want to cover that now, because I want to jump straight into how to get started. So just a quick overview for those who are still new to food forests is that a food forest is a multi-layered kind of garden growing edible and useful plants. But I want you to really remember that we're talking about taking inspiration from a forest. We're not trying to recreate a forest, and that a food forest is not defined by its size. It's really defined by its function and the way that we manage that garden as well. So by having a tiny food forest instead of a kind of raised bed full of annual vegetables, you can get so much more diversity within that space, because you can fit so many more plants within one small space just by adding in these layers. So you've got the trees and the shrubs and the plants underneath those. You can just pack so much more into a small space, and it can look so much more attractive as well, and have that kind of year-round interest for us, but also habitat and food sources for wildlife. But when you're designing your food forest, you don't have to include all of these layers. And I say this all the time, this is one of the biggest things that I think people kind of get quite worried about getting started with, is, having to feel that they have to get all these 7 layers into their food forest. But actually you don't. You could just start with one tree, one shrub and a few ground cover plants, and that would also be a food forest. So I want you to sort of right from the very beginning just think about what it is that's feeling overwhelming for you, and just to try and take that stress away. So it'd be really great actually if anyone would like to put in the comments what is the biggest sort of issue that's stopping you from getting started with your food forest, and I always read and answer all the comments. So it'd be really great to sort of understand really what it is that maybe you're finding difficult, and how I might be able to help you overcome that and get you started. So in terms of deciding what is going to go in your food forest, I think sometimes the choice is just so vast that we kind of get stuck before we even get a plant in the ground because we're just so concerned about making the right choice. How do you know if that's the right plant to buy? Is it going to do well? And so I think it's just worth spending a little bit of time. And I have got a free downloadable plant profile template that helps you to sort of do a little bit of research and make sure that you've got all the information that you need to know about different plants so you can assess what might fit into your garden. And also I'll put a link to the video I have about how to choose plants for your food forest. But I think the main things are thinking about is your soil dry or is it wet? And will your plants enjoy that? Is it sunny or shady? And is the plant that you're looking at going to enjoy that situation? And also thinking about, is it something you're actually going to want to use? So if you eat a lot of berries, maybe you want to choose something, like a blackcurrant or raspberries or something like that. If you're finding that you're really wanting to grow more salads and green leafy crops, then maybe look at concentrating on that, particularly if you have limited space. There's nothing to say that you have to include fruit trees in your forest garden. You might decide to put in a tree that's great for pollinators, and to make actually the understory the really edible part. So, it's totally down to you, and it is your garden and you get to choose, and no one's going to come along and say, oh, you're not allowed to put that in a food forest. And as I mentioned before, just don't be afraid of planting the wrong thing in your garden. So if you plant something and it's just really not doing well, you can easily dig it up and move it somewhere else and try it somewhere else, or even swap it with a friend. If they've got a plant that's not doing well in their garden, maybe you could both do a swap and see if your respective plants might do better in each other's gardens. So just think of it really as a big experiment, a big learning journey, and just get started without being afraid. Even with my many years of experience of designing and managing food forests, I put a plant in a garden that should do well. I've ticked all its boxes. I've planted it in a sunny spot, which is what it likes, with some moist soil, which it likes, and it still just doesn't thrive. And that's just because it's a new garden to me and I haven't learned what does well there yet. So don't think that because you're a beginner or because you're not very experienced, that somehow if someone came along and designed it all for you, that they would get it all right first time, because they wouldn't. And actually, I think it would be, really great for everyone here to learn about any maybe garden lessons that you've had from your own gardening experiences. Is there something that you've tried that really didn't work well? And it'd be just really great to hear about what you've been up to and what you've learned along the way, if you've already done a bit of food forest gardening already. So option one when creating your food forest is to clear a completely new area. So it might be that you've got some lawn that you want to turn into a food forest, or you've got an existing border where you've decided to actually get rid of the plants that are in there already. And some of the best ways to do this, if it's a border of plants already, you can just dig them up. You might want to split and divide some of them and replant some of them in your garden, or give some away to friends or community gardens. If you've got a lawn, you've got a couple of options. If you're wanting a sort of instant garden, you could always strip off the turf layer. In a way, you're removing the best quality soil by doing that. There's a lot of kind of nutrition as well in the very top layer. So the best idea actually that I've done before is just lay some layers of cardboard down straight onto the grass. And then you can mulch it with something like some well-rotted compost or some wood chip. And you might decide then to plant straight through that. So then you can cut a hole in the cardboard and plant straight through the cardboard, just making sure that when you mulch back around the plant that you've planted, that there's no grass showing. And I've done that many times really successfully, and it just means that you can sort of do a very instant garden with no digging whatsoever. It's really the best option for the soil and the best option for you as well, because there's a lot less work. Here in this garden, I laid down some cardboard and some wood chip, and now the cardboard has completely rotted away. Everything that was there before has died off. So what I'm going to be doing is just raking the wood chip back and then planting the plants in and then putting the wood chip mulch back on again. So that's sort of a really easy one, but obviously it requires you to have the time to put the cardboard down and wait for everything underneath to die off. So cardboard and mulching is a really great way to get started. And by having this blank canvas, it's sort of really helpful because you're not having to take any other plants into account when you're deciding what to put in your garden. And this is, it's not a massive area. I think if you want to get started with a quick project, just go for something like 4 square meters. That's like a really nice size. So once you've got your plant list, a really easy way to do a layout is actually to get some paper circles and write the names of the plants on them. And ideally, if you can do this to scale so that you know what fits in the space. And I said I have a bit about this in the design workbook, but also next week's video is going to be all about how to do the paper circle method. But I'll just describe it briefly now. Is to then arrange the circles in different places and until you come up with a design that you're happy with. And this is just a really nice, easy way to get a garden layout without having to keep sort of drawing on a bit of paper and rubbing it off again and drawing on it again and rubbing it off again. And if you're really great with tech and you can do you can do this on a computer, you can do it digitally, then brilliant. If you already use that kind of software. Personally, I'm really rubbish with tech, so I just like to do it on paper. And so just by moving those around, you can come up with quite quickly a design that you're happy with, having moved things around. And what's great about that method is you can sort of do it over a few days. So you can sort of make one design. You can stick it down with maybe sticky tack or something like that and come back to it the next day and think, oh, actually, no, maybe I don't want that apple tree there. Maybe I want it over there. And so you can keep moving it around until you're happy with it. But don't procrastinate too long. Just sort of give yourself maybe 2-3 days, maybe leading up to a weekend, so that on the Saturday you know that you are ready to go out and plant those plants where they are on the design. Because you have to remember as well, the design is not set in stone. Even once it's in the ground, if you find that in the first year of that garden growing that things don't feel like they're quite in the right place, you can just make a note of that and move them, the following autumn, winter. So just don't be afraid to kind of put things in and get started. So option number 2 is where perhaps you have a garden that actually you mostly like already and you don't necessarily want to rip out your entire garden. Maybe it just seems too daunting. Maybe you just have lots of plants that you already like, but you'd still want to transition towards a food forest in the long run, or just take some of the food forest ideas and add them into your existing garden. So to start with, what you need to do is kind of have a walk around your garden and have a little bit of an audit in a way of plants that you like and plants that you don't like. So quite often I find people saying, oh, I've got this shrub in my garden, I don't really like it, but it's quite healthy, so I feel like I shouldn't take it out. And I'm just one for not being sentimental at all. If there's something that I don't really like, I don't have room in my garden for things that I don't really like, so I will happily take it out. So if you have something that you can find, you can go around your garden and identify the things that you don't really like or they're not really performing very well in your garden, then they are brilliant candidates to take out and replace with something else. So the idea of kind of just going in and swapping out plants here and there is a really nice, easy, beginner-friendly way to start your forest gardening. And so, even if all you've got is a herbaceous border at the moment, you might decide that you're going to add in maybe one fruit tree and a couple of fruiting shrubs or something like that. So you might be able to go along and think, actually, I'm going to keep most of these herbaceous plants in here, but at one end I'm going to plant in an apple tree in a bit of a gap. And actually probably most of the herbaceous plants under that will still be quite happy there for quite a few years until the apple tree gets big and starts casting shade. And then you might think, oh, actually that hebe's not doing very well. It's sort of kind of slowly dying off. So I'll take that out and I might put in a blackcurrant. And by just doing this kind of really careful kind of swapping in and swapping out things over time, you might find that sort of 3-4 years down the line that you actually have a forest garden, you know, without having cleared everything straight away. And this is also a way that is much more friendly towards wildlife, because when you clear a whole area, you're taking away all that habitat as well. You know, you sort of clearing everything out, whereas when you're swapping things in and out, you're leaving most of your garden undisturbed. So actually, you know, this is a really nice way. This is what we've been doing at my forest garden club that I run at a community garden down the road. Is we decided that rather than just sort of having a mass clearance of everything and ripping out all the habitat, that we would just start swapping things in and out. And it could be things like this aster here, which I planted. It just completely flops in the way of the path, you know, in a really irritating way. So this is a really great candidate for a plant that I'm going to move out of the way. And in its place, I have all sorts of different options. I could put in something like a daylily, so it's still really pretty, but I can eat every part of it. Or I might decide to even plant in some annuals, just because sometimes planting annuals feels a little bit less scary and permanent than planting perennial plants, which are going to be there year after year after year. So I might decide maybe next year I'm going to plant a courgette next to the path. You know, so there's just some really simple ways of kind of swapping things without having to feel like you need to start from scratch and rip out your entire garden. You might also want to prioritise plants which maybe aren't doing well in our changing climate. So, you know, this year we've had a really prolonged drought in the UK, and there are certain plants in my garden which I do like, but they've just required me to water a couple of times in the garden, and I just really want to have things in my garden which don't require any watering, even in drought conditions. So I'm thinking of those as being candidates to swap out with some other plant that's might fare better in the dry conditions. No one of these options is better than the other. It totally depends on what sort of feels right for you. Do you prefer to have a clean slate because you just want to start something totally new and have nothing in the way? Or are you the kind of person that actually prefers to do things gradually and over time? You'll end up with the same thing in the end. One will just get there quicker than the other, and one will be more full of learning experiences, shall we say, than the other. Because if you're starting from a completely blank slate, then every single plant in there is going to be new to you, and you're not going to know how well it's going to do in there. But that's brilliant, because then you have a really quick kind of learning journey. You learn a lot in a short space of time. So I would really love to hear in the comments which one of these two options is going to be the right one for you. I would love to hear if you have an area in your garden that you're going to clear, or if there are certain plants in your garden that immediately you're thinking, oh yeah, I can't wait to rip that out and plant in something edible or useful. So please, share your ideas with us in the comments. And remember that the worst mistake is not starting at all. So please just take one small action, even if it's just planting out one small thing in your garden, or just starting to create a list of what you would like to plant in your food forest.